Hello, everybody. Let me see if you can hear me. Can you hear me now? Welcome to the show. I think we got a good show tonight. I'm going to go ahead and bring in our co-host, Leo Frank. All right. Can you hear me all right, Leo?
Yep.
All right. For some reason, it was showing that I was muted, even though I was not supposed to be. How's everything on your little corner of the world?
It's confusing as usual.
I know all about that. Oh, somebody's commented there. The only thing about this studio that I'm in here, to see the comments, I have to make a mouse click, and then I have to click off of it and to get back to where I need to be. And even for guests, the guests are off to one side, and I have to click another time to see those. So, but tonight we do have a very good guest, I think. He's kind of like us in some degree. He's kind of low key on the internet, on Facebook. Me and you don't really stir a whole lot of stink on Facebook. I probably do more than you do.
Now, yeah, things calmed down for me over the last few years. But
I stir stuff. Sometimes I see stuff I can't help but comment.
Well, yeah, but you're not really stirring stuff up. You try to steer people in the right direction, and they freak out about it. That's on them, not you.
Well, I like the NFL football, so I'm kind of Pittsburgh Steelers are my team, and they're doing a lot of moves and stuff right now, signing people, and some of them's all right, some of them's not so all right. So sometimes it's hard not to comment on that stuff.
Yeah, I noticed.
I've been a fan for about 40 years or so. Watched my first game just before COVID hit a few years back. Went to Cincinnati and watched them play the Bengals, which was kind of cool. But yeah, sometimes that gets me in trouble. But now a lot of times I do type out stuff and then I don't. I end up deleting it. don't put anything on it. That's with Bigfoot as well.
Man, I do that on a daily basis.
It makes you feel better to write it out anyway. So.
Yep.
Well, tonight let's go ahead and get to our guest. Let me tell you a little bit about him first. Of course, I'll have to read it because I can't remember. I've not had much sleep. Tonight's guest is a 12th generation New Englander, retired combat veteran, 25 years of honorable service in the Army. He was also senior analyst and researcher at the Pentagon, and he is also a Bigfoot enthusiast who has had multiple sightings. So that sounds like a pretty good combination to me.
Stephen is an interesting man.
Interesting guy. So let's go ahead and bring him on. And I know I left out some of his bio because he's got so many fascinating aspects to his life. All right. Can you hear us all right, Stephen?
I can.
Okay, good deal.
Voices. It's good to see you too.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I turned your volume up just a little bit. You was a little bit low, but I got you fixed now, so you're good to go. So it was pretty easy to get on here, right?
I didn't have any troubles. I wasn't, you look at something, it's technology, and you go, am I supposed to do that next? Even though it said, do this next.
Got to make sure. I gave people just a brief overview of your background. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your background?
Well, I think that that was pretty good, but when people would ask, what was it that you did in the military, or how did you manage to make all the different aspects of your career work for you and come together? I mean, I started out I was always an artist, and I wanted to become a teacher, so I literally became an art teacher. But I worked for a modeling house and that actually built models of replicas and things like that, and in the graphic arts department before moving on. And I wasn't I didn't go into the military right away. I was 26 years old before I went into the military.
Wow.
Sorry, I had my college out of the way and everything else. And the military, being in the military, other than hearing about it from my father and uncles and whatnot, I was pretty clueless. So it was a real eye opener for me. But I managed to fit in it. But I managed to create this long, deep trough of it was kind of wide, of all these skills, and managed to weave them all together so that they worked out well for me in the Army. And
the military has really changed over the years as far as how they do things.
It has. I don't think that I could participate now. I honestly don't.
Have to ring the bell and get out of there.
I'm happy to be out of it and salute it and say goodbye.
Well, we do know that we do know that you're a Bigfoot guy. Do you want to go ahead and start talking about Bigfoot a little bit? Maybe tell us what got you interested in Bigfoot.
I had a sighting as a child, and I'm sitting in the sandbox at my parents' cottage, their camp in Ware, New Hampshire, and I saw something that I had no idea what it was. For whatever reason, I wasn't frightened by it. But some kind of forest creature that was bipedal, stood on two legs and had long, lanky arms and, very, very narrow shoulders, and had kind of like a pug dog's face to it. And I would say that it probably stood about 6 feet tall because it was standing next to the rope swings, and, just remembering it at that time. But I started talking to this thing at 4 years old. Of course, my mother came out of the house and said, "Who are you talking to?" And by then it was gone. But I don't know what it was, but I've sort of come to believe that maybe this thing was what some people refer to as a wood devil. But I don't know. I've also been told by other people that wood devils were non-existent, and that they're just a folkish creation that some lumberjacks came up with. But all I can say is, when you hear the stories of northern New Hampshire and Coas County, and you hear them talk about the wood devils, what I saw fits the same basic description. So kind of strange that they're gray and they're hairy, and somehow they're akin to Bigfoot or Sasquatch or something. I don't know how, but that was the start of it. And then Dad always had piles of hunting magazines around, and he always had all these sporting magazines around. So when I was a kid, it was very natural that for me to pick up a magazine and thumb through it, and if I saw something in it that interested me, I would put it aside, or I would make note of it, or whatever. And so at a very early age, I started to discover that there was in the United States, in North America, there was this thing, the North American abominable snowman. So this is before Patterson and Gemlin, and but not before some of the other sightings of some of the other fellows who out in California and other places. So they were still, those articles were showing up 1959, 1960, 1961, 62 in some of these magazines. So that caught my attention. Then of course my mother bought me my own subscription to Boy's Life, and Boy's Life always had articles about the abominable snowman or Bigfoot or, you know, kind of cryptid creatures and everything. And so over the years, I collected these magazines and just put them aside. I've still got a few of them here in the house somewhere. These old Boy's Life magazines with articles about bipedal critters living in the forest. So I'm thinking that's what got me started anyway. Seeing something, not knowing what it was, and then having, you know, a typical boy's curiosity. So.
Yeah, well, most people may not know, but it was commonly called the abominable snowman for way before it was called Bigfoot. I mean, that was the common name for it.
Right.
And so that was, I can understand that it being called that when you were, you know, younger.
Yeah, I didn't hear of any other names until later on. They may have referred to it as Bigfoot.
Or wild man. A lot of times they call it just wild man. You know,
hairy man, wild man.
Yeah.
Those kinds of names. Of course, we had also we live in an area in New England that's rich in Native American culture, and so you heard all sorts of other types of names about different types of things that lived in the forest as well, whether it was their folklore or you know, their history or whatever. But I mean, you used to hear about pugwudgies and stuff like that. And
right.
I've never seen anything like that. Don't have any idea about any of that. But everything I've seen or encountered was fairly large.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stories. When you get down into a local level, a lot of times the humanoid creatures will have some kind of odd name because of maybe where it was located at, or so even though it may be a Bigfoot, they may call it White Devil or something, you know, because of the local area, local slang or whatever. Sometimes they have a different name.
Right.
So how long was it between your first sighting and then your next sighting?
Oh, my first sighting occurred like what I, had explained, like when I was 4 years old. So we're talking like in 1959, 1960. And my second sighting didn't happen until 1984. So I had, still had an interest in Bigfoot, but at that time I was in Germany and I was a platoon leader in an infantry company, forwardly deployed, active general defense position up on the border if the Russians came across. And it was, height of the Cold War. So, my mind was completely filled with all the everyday type of things that you have to do to be prepared for combat, to complete your mission. And the second sighting occurred in a training area in Germany that has, the area itself has a lot of history behind it about sightings. And I had no idea that this thing was, I knew the Yeti was in the Himalayas. I knew Bigfoot was in the United States. I had no idea there was anything in Germany or really much of anywhere else. But it was summer of 1984, and it started quite simply with a patrol going out at night and running into something. And the patrol belonged to me. I wasn't part of it. But these guys just if they could have done anything wrong, they did everything wrong on patrol, and because they panicked, they got scared, and they broke up, and they went in different directions to get back to the platoon perimeter, and some of them didn't make it back for an hour and a half because they were out in the woods running around they thought they were being chased by things. And of course there was no opposing force of soldiers in the woods at that time. So there weren't any people out there.
How many people saw this, roughly?
Two of them right up close, and three more probably at a distance of maybe 20 or 30 feet. And those are the guys that broke off and ran and got lost in one direction. The patrol leader was a young corporal, last name of Livingston. He had night observation device goggles on, so he had nods on, and he was able to see it clearly. His radio man, who was chattering to me, kid by the name of Hodgkins, he was calling back to us and trying to explain what Livingston was seeing. He didn't have the ability to see in the dark. So he was just trying to say, he was just repeating whatever Livingston was saying. And of course, none of it made any sense. And Livingston had moved, at one point he had moved around a tree, and he had decided that he wasn't going to go any further. He was going to make his way back to the perimeter. And he turned and he ran right into this big hairy thing. And he's got his arms on it, and it literally pushed him away. Not harshly or anything. It just pushed him away. And he was standing there looking at it, could see all the hair and everything. Of course, Livingston's probably around 5'9", 5'10", and he looked up, and he is looking. As he looks up, he's looking up into the nostrils of this thing, looking down at him. So it was quite tall. At that point, it was just all you heard was breaking sticks and breaking branches and cussing, and as those two guys were making their way back into the camp. So when they got back, it was probably 5 to 10 minutes before you could get them calmed down, so they could, even explain themselves and try to talk about what was going on. I'm a fairly new lieutenant in the United States Army at that time, and I'm not going to get on my radio and call my company commander and say, "Hey, I've got a Bigfoot out here." But I got a radio call, and it happened to be my company commander, and I'm saying, "Oh boy, this is just gonna go downhill from here." And my company commander calls me and he goes, "Is there anything strange happening over there?" And I said, "Kind of why?" And he goes, "Because there's something strange happening over here." And he's probably 500 meters away from me down the line. So it was a very interesting night because we were set up in a battalion-sized defense position with supply trains behind us and everything else like that. And the way that you would set up in the field, if you were expecting back at that time, the Russians to come across the border. And so a single platoon covers probably a 400-meter front. So there's three platoons to every infantry company. So, I mean, you're talking 1,200-meter fronts. And so all the way up and down this very, very lengthy perimeter is activity going on. And they're all claiming that they're seeing a hairy biped. Now, whether it was more than one hairy biped or it was just the one moving quickly up and down the line, I don't think we'll ever figure that out. But that was what started it all. And it was still several days later before I got to see anything. And then before I had a sighting. But I mean, that was the hubbub everywhere. Was they were just talking about, you know, what you had seen or what I had seen or what the sergeant had seen, type of thing.
We've lost your sound, Stephen. Well, your video was breaking up a little bit, and we lost your sound. We may have to pop you out and back in if we need to.
Okay.
Oh, now I can hear you now. So,
is it back? Okay.
Yeah, it was back. Yeah, several people saw this creature before you saw it a few days later, correct?
Right. So that's why I say multiple sightings that are, you know, a single simultaneous sightings by multiple individuals that all end up collaborating the information in the end and putting it together. Because, I mean, this goes on for every time we went back to that training area, you know, there was always somebody that was there that remembers what had happened the year before and start telling the stories and everything else like that. And then somebody else would say, well, you know, there was this weird occurrence that happened just last night. Now that you're telling me about that, it makes sense. So apparently this particular area has had, like I said, has had a history of Bigfoot sightings or some kind of large bipedal, hairy cryptid, you know, going on for a long, long time.
Did you see it in the daytime or nighttime?
I saw it in the daytime and the nighttime.
And the nighttime.
Right. So when I first saw it, they had called an index to the first portion of the operation, and we were going to flip-flop from going from defense to, you know, the aggressor and back and forth. And so we had been in the defense and now we were going to be the aggressor type of thing. So they were going to give us a day in between to rest and clean the equipment and everything else. And I took the opportunity to take a nap in the area that I was in. And I laid down under this rock face that went, you know, a cliffside that went up probably about 150 feet. And when I woke up, I don't know, you know, whatever, I woke up, I put my hand down in the leaves and something stuck me and it was painful. And I looked and it was a piece of bone. So I started to clear away the area of the leaves, all the compost and everything that was there, and found this big bone pile, broken bones. And we're talking broken bones, that large bones that were like a cattle leg bone that was broken in half. But these were like red deer and Hearst, which is a larger deer, which is more like an elk, and some wild boar bones, pig bones, because the skulls were there and everything. And right about that time, I'm making this discovery, and I'm about to call over my driver, and there was another lieutenant that was with me. I was about to call them over and say, hey, take a look at that. The driver, last name Hall, calls out and he says, what's that? And so Hembree, the other lieutenant, myself, both look in the direction that he's, standing there looking. And about 300 feet away, there's this creature standing there, a little bit higher than we are, up on the edge of a ledge. And it's just looking out back in our direction. It stood there probably for maybe a minute, 300 feet away. And it just slowly backed up, turned itself, walked back into the forest, and was gone. And then I was like, well, I guess Livingston really did see something.
What color was it?
It was dark. So I'm gonna have to say it was either really dark brown or it was black. But I mean, it was dark. It was not light, and it was in full sunlight, from the day. It was a clear day, and it was a bright sunny day. So, but it seemed to be very dark in color at 300 feet. Of course, if you get closer, that might change. Considerably might change. But that was the first time I saw it. Second time I saw it, we were on a night road march shortly after that, like maybe within a day or two. And I was the lead vehicle for the battalion. So this is a mechanized unit. And I've got 4 armored personnel carriers, and the next platoon has 4 armored personnel carriers, and the next platoon has 4 armored personnel carriers, and the company that we're within probably has 1 more armored personnel carrier plus two big deuce-and-a-half trucks and maybe some other equipment too, trailers certainly, and we're in a night convoy, so we're spread out, roughly 15 meters apart at night, and then the driver and the track commander would have night observation devices to be able to drive in a blackout drive with no lights on. And of course, that's not entirely true because there's some limited lights on the light features on the tracks. And one of those features is a red light that's at the back of each track that you can see. And as long as it's a red dot, you're 15 meters away. And if you get closer, it gets too sharp. And if you get further away, it kind of fuzzes up. So as long as it's a red dot, you're good to go. And anyway, this thing, we're going along on a dirt trail that is on the outer circumference of the training area, which is Hohenfels, Germany, Hohenfels training area. And there's some old castles and this that are pretty interesting, especially at night under a relatively full moon. And there's these mesas on one side, just come up right out of nowhere, out of the forest, and you'll just see this rock-faced mesa sticking up. And as we're driving along, I've got myself, the driver, and my platoon sergeant, who happened to have night observation device glasses on as well, nods on, and he's standing in the back combat portal looking out over the top of the vehicle. I'm sitting in the command seat above the vehicle where the machine gun would go, and then of course the driver has his own hatch as well. And all 3 of us, it's like all at once, just went, what was that? Something walked across the road right in front of us, took 2 steps, and it was gone. And we were like, that was pretty big. And we kept going, and of course, we the 3 of us were chattering about it the whole time, and without anybody, we're not on the radio we hadn't broken radio contact, made contact, or anything like that. So the three of us just went on and on and on about it. We made plans to go back the next day. So I had told Jack, who was Jack Latham in the back, I said, mark that on the map. We'll come back in the morning and take a look. And we came back in the morning to take a look. We never found any tracks or anything like that because, you know, several hundred vehicles had passed that way after us that night. But we did, there were a lot of small pine trees on the side, and there was a little like Christmas tree farm. And we did recognize that this thing was taller than some of those pine trees, some of those Christmas trees that were growing. And so we measured those the next day, and they were all in the neighborhood of about 6.5 feet. And this was taller than 6.5 feet. So we figured it was probably in the neighborhood of about 7 feet tall. So even today, you can go out on the web and you can look Hohenfels up and you can look up Bigfoot, and lo and behold, stories appear that other soldiers have. So they go into the caves. I mean, this area has a lot of caves, and it's in a mountainous region, and the soldiers nowadays and have been forever going into the caves looking for bones, looking for Bigfoot, and just, you know.
Well, now when you found the bones, the pile of bones, you think that was possibly from Bigfoot kills?
I wrote about it. This changed my whole perspective on Bigfoot in life. I mean, it really did. This got me. This was the red button, you know, to my curiosity seriously being pushed and held down and not let back up again. I mean, I was tweaked about what I had seen, and 2 encounters or 2 sightings within a matter of just a few days, and other people with me being there with me, and other people having had their own experiences while I was there, but I wasn't witness to, like Livingston and Hodgkins. And so this really, this was I was infected at that point. I mean, I was just nuts about it. Anything that I could find to read about it, anybody that had any experiences at Hohenfels that was willing to talk about it. I mean, we would go into a guest house, a German guest house, and I would ask the owners, you know, hey, you guys know what Bigfoot is? And my company commander and the other lieutenants would say, shut up, don't talk about that stuff.
Well,
I was just, what is this thing? So I had written everything that had occurred and at Hohenfels has been written down into a story, because I was trying to explain to myself what I had seen, because what I had seen was absolutely fascinating. It was magical. It was like nothing I couldn't figure this out to save my life. And as a 26, 27, 28-year-old guy now, being now I can't shut this off. When I was a 4-year-old, it was like, okay, I go to bed and I say my prayers, and now I lay me down and sleep, you know, and I'm protected, so I don't have to worry about this thing looking in the window. But we would be out in the woods, wherever we were out in the woods. I'd be like looking around in Germany going, okay, I know this isn't Hohenfels, but do you guys, and it's like, you know, every place we went, it's like asking the local people, have you ever heard of Bigfoot?
You gave up looking for the Russian invasion and started looking for the Bigfoot invasion.
Exactly. So I was there for 3 years. And so you can imagine, we actually had the opportunity to do some investigating ourselves, even though we were in uniform, and whenever we had downtime, we would start looking for evidence, start looking for clues, start looking for footprints, start looking for another pile of bones, and to see if the bones had been gnawed on and that kind of thing. If there were scratches on the bones, if any tools had been used on the bones, like rocks or anything else like that. And we found that there were all sorts of strange little things that like tools, broken sticks that had been used to get into the marrow in a broken bone. And then the stick would be discarded, and you'd be like, it would be right there, and you'd pick it up, and you'd look around, and you'd try to figure out, is this something the squirrels had done, chewing on the end of the stick, or is this what we think it is, that somebody broke this stick and then maybe, pulled it back even further to make it sharper so that they could get in there and twirl it around a little. One of the fellas that did some research with us was a corporal. His last name was Lucas. And Lucas, from that point on, always brought he had one of the old beta cameras and video cameras, and he always brought the beta camera to the field with us. This is so strange, because Lucas came to me that first time we had the sightings, and he said, if you can get me back to the rear, meaning if I could get him to hold where the cantonment area was, where the barracks were that we would stay in sometimes when we were using their ranges, if he could get back to the building, he could make a phone call to his wife, and his wife would drive the beta camera down from Mainz, at Lee Barracks, where we were actually stationed. And I was like, she'd do that? He goes, she'll do it. And even though it was, a couple of hours drive for her back and forth, she brought the beta camera down, and we got him on the supply truck twice, once to make the call and once to go pick up the camera from his wife, which was very interesting. And then he was going around and he was taking videos all the time. We found some tracks, some footprints, and they were deep enough in the mud on the road. And we sent him in, and he came back with some plaster of Paris. And interesting, he didn't go to a store or anything else like that. He went, all the military installations always encourage the soldiers that live on post to fix it yourself. If you're in military housing and it's broke, go ahead and fix it yourself. So he went down to the supply center that had all the nails and all the paint and all the tape and everything else like that, picked up some plaster of Paris and brought it back. And he was casting, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days. And I have no idea where those casts are today, because they were his personal property. But I mean, at one time we had them in the barracks, and people would say, what's that thing that's sitting on the lieutenant's desk? What's that thing that, the corporal has in the sergeant's office? That's a footprint. So it's kind of interesting. But when we broke up, when that group broke up and went its separate way, because we started to come apart in 1986, and we were sent back to the continental United States or other places. We kept in touch, but we didn't continue to work together like we had before, collecting evidence and things. And we had hair samples that it could have been deer hair or bears or something, or wild boar. But we were convinced that what we had probably could test out at that time, could probably test out as being belonging to a Bigfoot. And we'd taken some pictures and everything, and all that. I imagine a lot of that stuff is with Lucas today. He's probably the sole retainer of most of that stuff. So I the one guy that I still talk to now is Jack Latham, and he lives in Snowflake, Arizona, and you know Mogollon Heights is right there, or Mogollon Heights is right there, and the Apache Indian Reservation that is always featured on the television shows is right there, and I shot him a note the other day, just a message, and I said, you're not looking, are you? And he's like, yeah. He goes, it's like sort of like, yeah, but don't tell my wife. Because we used to talk about it all the time, and we used to get involved in it. And it's like, okay, if we had the opportunity to go down to that where that happened on that military installation, we took it. And so if they needed somebody to go down and to set something up, or if there was a mission to go down and run a machine gun range at Hohenfels, we would volunteer, and we'd go down and we'd spend a few days down there, but we'd always get there early enough, and then we'd leave a little bit later so that we would have time to go out to that one particular area. And that area was known as OP-19. It stands for Observation Post Number 19. It literally has like a very, very large platform, like a deer stand, but made out of timbers, and so it's probably 10 foot across by 10 foot across, and it would allow people to observe the military operations going on. It probably was 12 feet off the ground with a ladder going up, and so they have those all over, and they'll observation post whatever, it's usually a number, and this place was called OP-19, and that's the area where we spent most of our time maneuvering, and that's the same area where we had our sightings.
Do you know if any more bones were found? And like in the cave, you said they searched the caves. You ever find anything in there?
I read a series of I don't know, maybe memoirs or something. These guys, three sergeants had actually developed a page on the web. I don't know if I could find it again. I don't know if it's still up. But they talked about this one cave that's to the south of Hohenfels, off of the post itself, and they found bones there. And they claim that not only did they find large bones that probably belonged to a large biped, but they also claimed that they found some human bones too. And that was their mistake. As soon as they mentioned that they had found some human bones to somebody that lives in that area, they got visited by local authorities saying you can't go in there because they might have been people that had escaped the Nazis, because there was a prisoner of war camp there. There was also a German confinement area for laborers, Jewish extraction, Russian, whatever, and it wasn't one of the kill camps. It was a labor camp, but still, some of those guys used to disappear once in a while, and it's historically possible that those remains belong to some of the escapees, and so they put up a stink about it and said that they weren't allowed to go back in there. Now, that wouldn't stop me, but but they also did mention that there had been areas in that cave system that they had put brick and mortar together and built up walls so that you couldn't continue down some of the passages and things too. So that there was some effort at some time after the 1940s to either preserve those whatever's in those caves or to hide what is ever in those caves. So my guess is if it's being used by a large biped, then there's that crossover between contamination of whatever's in there that's human versus, as well as whatever's in there that is not, that is a large hominid. So it would be interesting to be able to go back. Years ago, I always said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get another tour. And I never did get another tour in Germany. And that was my first tour as an officer in the United States Army. So, I mean, I never got back again.
Well, at least it was memorable anyways, right?
Yeah, Germany for all it is was a great tour of duty.
Well, what people may not realize is that at one time Russia had all that. That was all belonged to Russia all the way up to right up to Germany's doorstep, basically.
It did.
And
right
which has changed now. So
yeah, it's the forests that are in and around Hohenfels are just a stone's throw from Czechoslovakia, and now I think Czechoslovakia is called Chechnya. I think it's called Chechnya. And then Slovakia is still there, and then Moldavia and whatever. But yeah, that was, it literally just a stone's throw away, just a matter of miles, maybe 12 or 14 kilometers away from the border of the old Soviet bloc nations.
Right.
So,
people have watched any of the current war that's going on over there now in the Ukraine, you could see all that used to belong to Russia that they're fighting, really where they're fighting at now.
Right.
The old USSR.
It did.
But how big were those caves, height-wise? Do you have any idea?
You can walk into some of them. Others you have to literally duck down and get in. I don't think that these kids did much crawling around. I'm thinking that these caves were probably worked out over the years by humans, and century after century, people got in there. There was probably some kind of mining or prospecting going on.
Right.
They were natural caves, and then they've been exploited for whatever reason. Different generations of people have used them for.
Well, since I've been hearing some I guess skeptical claims that a large humanoid would not be able to get into these caves, but I know around here, even if they had to duck down, once they got into the cave, there's plenty of room for them to walk around. And I think people don't understand that. They think because they have to squeeze down into something, it's that way always, but it's not.
That's the way it is.
They're humongous when you get back in them. They're very large.
Yeah, that's the way it is here. And there are a lot of this area is full of old gold mines, and this part of New Hampshire, and that's the way it is here. The entrance might be only as tall as a short person, but once you're inside, they're cavernous.
Well, we've got one old coal mine here that the guys ride ATVs through them. So that tells you about how large they are. You could sit on an ATV, a full-grown man, and ride through the mine.
Right through it, right.
They do that. That's pretty close to where I'm at. Actually, I've not done it, but I done had all I want of the coal mine, I guess, for that.
Yeah.
Started working in that when I was 13-year-old, so that's had all I want of that.
Yeah. Once you're done with it, you're done with it.
Yeah. I enjoyed working in the coal industry, but you never knew from day to day if you had a job, and that makes it hard to buy anything.
Right.
So what I want to know is, with this happening while you're in the military and where you were stationed, was there any effort by anybody higher up to come in and quiet you guys down about talking about it, or any interference that way?
Yes, both ways actually. It was, there's always leadership can always become an interested party, because leadership can be just as curious as anyone else. And of course, then there's always the safety factors. So that they can be very hard-nosed about it too. But they seem to be extremely interested in it. When I never went to the field without, while I was in Germany, if I went to the field, I always carried my weapons. So I always had, I always had a Colt 45, 1911 Colt 45, and I always had an M16A1 rifle. And I always carried ammunition. At least two of us in the platoon carried ammunition. Now, there were two reasons for that, and one was because the Soviets had liaison mission officers that were allowed to come on our side of the border, and they would follow us around and they would try to figure out what we were doing and where we were going. It was all an intelligence gathering thing. We had American liaison officers on their side as well, of the border. We tried to leave we used to call them smell 'em, Soviet liaison mission officer. And we used to leave the smell 'em officers alone as much as possible until they just bothered us so much that you had to confront them and ask them to leave. But you'd set up camp at night and you'd set up in a defensive position that was, like I would say, 400 meters wide. And they would creep between the vehicles and the positions at night, looking to see if they could grab a radio that had been left on the ground unattended, or to grab a weapon that somebody had put down while they shouldn't have. And we even caught one guy trying to take a machine gun off the top of a tracked vehicle one night. So for that reason, I carried ammunition. If I had to confront them and I had to fire a round in the air or something like that, then I would. And I did that one night. I shot a round in the air, and he promptly got down off of that vehicle and apologized and left. But he spoke okay English too. But the other one was Eurasian boar hogs are all over the fields and the forest over there. And these are not timid animals, and they're they have their own mindset. They may leave you alone or they may not leave you alone. I had one 30 pounder. This is just a small little guy. Literally tear the tire off of my Jeep. The passenger side right front tire. He tore it off my Jeep while I was sitting in the Jeep. And then we would walk up from the motor pool in Baumholder, and we had to climb up this hill, and it was called Allenbach. And we go up this hill at the end of the day from the motor pool, and he had to be 600 pounds. This big boar hog would come right down. They had concrete steps going up the side of the steep hillside, and he would come right down to this particular area where they had put in heavy pipes so that the soldiers had railings in that particular area to prevent them from falling off that area. And he would come right down there and lean against those pipes, and those pipes would move. And these pipes are probably 4.5 inches across. And he would lean on those pipes, and this was his idea of getting food. And every soldier that went by there would give him crackers from their MRE, or would open up an MRE and give him a hamburger patty, and that's how this guy got to be so big. And so you'd think that he was tame and he was just in a wild park or a petting zoo or something, but that's not how they necessarily behave out in the forest. And so we would we would practice having boar alerts, wild boar alerts. So you climb the quickest tree, or you get on the quickest vehicle, or whatever it is when the boar hogs come around, and that might be 3 little piglets followed by mama, or it might be one of the larger herds that are up to 50 or even 60 boar hogs, where there's like 10 mamas, and mama weighs 450 pounds. Daddy weighs probably 500 pounds or more. But there were a lot of times when I've lost track of what I was supposed to answer that question. My wife just stuck a note under my. Besides that, so I had the ammunition, and I went off on all of that. That's why we carried the ammunition. Sorry about that, guys. The short answer to all of this is my battalion commander came to me that very first night that Livingston had his sighting. Livingston and Hodgkins had his sighting, and he asked me if I had any spare rounds that he could use, because he'd been hearing all the excitement. Now, my battalion commander is a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and so he wanted to make sure that he had live ammunition just in case, because we didn't know what this thing was. So I didn't expect to ever get any flack from him, because he was asking for protection from me. But there were a few others that foofed it off and thought it was, oh, you guys, there's something seriously wrong with you. You need to stop this. But my company commander and my battalion commander had their own incidents, and they more or less became believers. They had their own encounters in that same general area, and so they would not. They weren't gonna tell the rest of us, okay, this is garbage, because they themselves had something. They had seen something or heard something, and whatever it was, and they had stories to tell themselves. And even the brigade commander, who was a full colonel, he had a sighting himself, and I witnessed his sighting. So, I mean, I witnessed what was going on at his vehicle that night, and myself, because he had pulled into my area, and I was trying to figure out, why is somebody moving this late at night? It was about 11 o'clock at night, and why is somebody moving this late at night in the forest? Because usually, as it's dark, they would tell us no moving vehicles. And the reason for that is because soldiers lie on the ground and fall asleep, and vehicles run over them. So they would say, once it gets dark, you can't move your vehicles. Set yourselves up in your positions. That's it. 11 o'clock at night, this armored personnel carrier comes in, and it's the brigade commander, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it was him until the next morning. And they had started to set up their equipment, and they had lowered the ramp on their combat hatch, the combat ramp on the back of their armored personnel carrier, put a couple of jerry cans under it to make a platform, and they were pitching a tent over the top of that to sleep on, when all of a sudden there was a lot of commotion and noise and everything, and they abandoned that altogether and threw everything down on the ground and lifted the hydraulics back up and closed the ramp, and that was it until morning. And I went over and tapped the vehicle. I saw who it was in the morning, their bumper numbers, but I went over and tapped on the vehicle, and I was met with a 45 in the face by the brigade commander. And I said, "Sir, it's just your neighbor." I said, "But what, it's like, what is all going on here? What were you guys doing last night?" He goes, "You see anything big out here on two legs?" He goes, "Walking around?" Maybe. So he had his own sighting, and had scared them and pushed them inside that, 13 tons of homogeneous steel. They had gotten in there. That's where they felt safe, was inside that hull. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of people that at different ranks that come across stuff and they're perplexed by it or interested in it, and then of course if somebody says, all right, this is all nonsense, then one of the general officers came along and said this is all nonsense. I think everybody would pretend that it was nonsense, but they would still go about their business believing what they wanted to believe and doing what they wanted to do. They just wouldn't do it in front of the general officer. So
Makes
I
sense.
think that's probably true.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like you said earlier, once it gets in your blood, it's there. You can't get rid of it. I know
You
all
cannot.
three of us, without a doubt, think about Bigfoot every day, multiple times. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating subject, and once it gets a hold of you, you can't turn it loose.
You're done.
better or
You're
for worse.
contaminated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really some interesting stories, but that is not your only sightings. You've had
No.
other sightings. Tell us about your next sighting.
I think the next one. It wasn't my sighting, but it was a person with me. So I'll go in this direction. I was placed on orders to go to Oklahoma to Lawton, Oklahoma, to Fort Sill for 9 weeks of training, and the group of guys that I was going with, I had already been in training with. We all knew each other because we had just spent 20 weeks together at Fort Gordon in Georgia. So some of us drove out, some of us flew out, some of us drove out together, whatever. But on my way out, I went through Arkansas. And I got tired driving through Arkansas. It was getting on in the evening, late afternoon, early evening. And I saw signs for the Dardanelle Lakes. I thought, that's probably a good place to find a campground and pull up for the night. And I pulled into the Dardanelle Lakes, and I got into one of their campsites that was a very remote, primitive campsite. And in this case, I'm driving down these logging roads, old dirt roads, and I find the trailer to the campsite's guardian or manager, and I pay him the $3 to stay at the campsite for the night. And he asked me, which one, do you think and I told him I wanted one close to the water, so he directed me to a particular campsite, and I went down to that one. And I had never heard so many cicadas and so many night bugs as Oklahoma and Arkansas. The cacophony is so loud.
Yep.
You can't hear yourself think.
We get them like that here.
Yeah. And and it's everything from bullfrogs to peepers to tree frogs to, every type of insect you can imagine. And I'm cooking, doing my thing, and it's getting dark, and I had a little ring fire, and I made myself a little pallet bed out of some blankets and things in the back of my pickup truck, and I was going to sleep in the back of my pickup truck under the stars, I thought, and but I'm like, I literally had all my web gear and everything with me, and I had put some earplugs in my ears. It didn't help.
No.
So they're not comfortable. I took them out and put them back in their case, and I'm like, I'm sitting, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do this or not. And I figured, eventually I'll fall asleep. And it's probably around 11 o'clock at night, and I've been trying to sleep now for maybe 2.5 hours. And just like somebody threw a switch, it all went quiet. And I was like, now what is that? What predator caused that to happen? I mean, nothing in the immediate area. Everything was just soundless. And I heard some shuffling large enough for me to think it might be kids being, out there, or somebody trying to spook me or something like that. And I thought about it, and I've got the old Gazette out, and I'm looking at the Gazette, and I'm like miles above Fouke, Arkansas. And I'm like, we're leaving. And I threw everything in the cab of the truck and I drove away. Because as soon as I saw it said Fouke, Arkansas, as soon as I saw that, I was like, I'm done. I got to Oklahoma, and 9 weeks of training there, and a good bit of that was done out of doors. And we had a foreign exchange student with us from a foreign military, and this fella just happened to be from Somalia. And he was a major. The rest of us were captains in the United States Army. This guy was a exchange student from Somalia, and he was a major. And we had a night training mission where we were doing land navigation. So one of us would operate the compass, no big deal. The next one would hold the map and would keep the paces, and the third guy would break the bush. He would go out in front of us, and you say, okay, you see that? I'd shoot an azimuth on my compass, and I'd say, see that big tree down there, 300 meters? Walk to that tree and stand on the left-hand side of it. And that's what the bush breaker does. So he goes out there and he stands there, then you catch up to him, and then you shoot another azimuth. You take another direction with your azimuth, and then on and on and on. The whole time we were doing this, Tom and I noticed that Yusuf wasn't really paying attention. He'd end up on the right side of the tree, or he'd end up behind the tree where we couldn't see him, and we'd be like, come on, you understand English perfectly well. What is the issue? And he kept saying, there's monkeys. He goes, do you have monkeys? And both Tom and I were going, no, there's no monkeys here. Now we are in the Washita National Park. It's the Washita Mountains. Some people would say Wichita, but they pronounce it Washita. And we're in the Washita National Park. It's a mountain range. There's antelope and there's buffalo. There's deer, and there's probably elk there too. But we didn't think there were any monkeys, so we kept telling him monkeys. And then he kept saying, then we did this again, and he ended up on the wrong side of one of the trees or whatever. And says, how hard can this be? And he goes, do you guys have big monkeys? We're like, how big? And he goes, like this big. And he held his hand up over his head. He goes, like this big. He goes, do you have big monkeys? And we were like, no. It didn't even dawn on. I mean, because now we're just aggravated with them. This guy from a foreign country, from Africa, and we're thinking, what is he trying to pull on us? We don't have apes. And what are you talking about? We don't have monkeys in the United States. And he was like, yes, you do. And then when we finally stopped, we got out on this road where we were supposed to. That was our last point, and it was our pickup point. And they were going to come and pick us up. Then Tom and I started grilling him and asking him, "What are you talking about? These monkeys? What what was all this?" And then he starts explaining. And both Tom and I look at each other and go, Bigfoot? Well, we didn't see anything, but apparently something was bothering him the whole time we were out there. And he kept saying, he goes, it's following us. He goes, but it was paralleling us. It's following us, and we'd turn around and look behind us. But, because he would say, it's following us, and we'd go, There's nothing behind us. And of course, it's in the dark, and all we have is 3 flashlights with red cover lenses on them. That's all we're using to see, But he kept saying, and we also, you'd notice every once in a while this flashlight would go like this, and he'd start looking around him, and we'd like, what is it with you? When we finally got to the road for the pickup point, and the vehicles comes down the road and picks us up, it's a 2.5 truck, and it picks us up. By then we figured out, okay, he was seeing something that Tom and I just weren't interested in trying to figure out what he was seeing, but it made a lot of sense after that. So that's an area where I have personal friends that also have had experiences there, and not just personal friends in the military, but I made a good friend out of one of the Apache Indian chiefs that is there in the reservation that's next to Fort Sill, because he had been in the service, he'd gotten out of the service, he'd retired as a sergeant major, and he used to come to the gym, and I spent a lot of time in the gym at that time. And I got to know this guy, and we would talk about things, and he would tell me about his experiences with Bigfoot out there. And this is sort of after this occurred like after the time when we had been out on the road with Yusuf. Probably the night land navigation event probably happened within the first 2 weeks that we were out there, and then I met the other fella. And then one of my bosses had been a pilot in Vietnam. He'd gotten out of the war. He'd gotten out of the military. He ended up joining the reserves. He was elected the sheriff of Lawton County in Oklahoma, and he investigated all of these sightings. People would call him up and say, "There's something in my yard. It's leaning against my fence post, or it tore my fence post up, or it knocked my lamp post down, or whatever." And he would be out there, and he was absolutely convinced that there was a Bigfoot-like creature in and around the area of Lawton, Oklahoma. And then I didn't meet him until several years later, when he actually became my battalion commander when I was stationed in Florida, because he had gone back in the reserves and then been activated back on active duty, and he had a lot to talk about out in Oklahoma. So that kind of fills in Oklahoma.
We had a question. Have you ever noticed any strange, odd lights associated with Bigfoot sightings in your experience?
Some what now?
Strange light anomalies.
I can't say that I have, but it could be that I'm not paying attention to that. Mm-hmm. Have I ever talked about light anomalies, honey? She says no.
Okay.
But now I'll be looking all the time and wondering. Yeah, I have heard people talk about that before, but I haven't.
Yeah, I've never experienced it neither. I've experienced it in a paranormal setting, in a haunted location or something like that, but not in the forest. Yeah, different setting altogether. Yeah, I can understand that. So let's go on to your next sighting, because you have actually a couple of others.
This is an easy interview. Put Stephen in front of the camera and just ask him a question like every 15 minutes.
Ask him a question and let him talk for 10 minutes, right? Yeah.
You sure you're not a preacher?
I started out very early as an orator, and I had speeches that I used to have to give.
Okay.
And I was being trained as a communications specialist And of course, then when they found that out in the military, they were like, "Oh, you can manage all these meetings between the generals and everything, and the concerned parties, whether they were civilian or whatever, and you can set these up, and you can be the guy that breaks everybody into what's going on." And I got stuck in that for quite a while, and it's very interesting. Along with doing my normal job, and then they throw this box of information at you and say, "Okay, the generals are coming next week. You're going to learn all this by then." Okay. I think the next one would bring us back to Florida. I don't remember having any experiences in New Jersey when I was at Fort Dix. Although there were a lot of experiences, I can't say that there were a lot of little things that went on at night that I chalked up to the wild dogs at Fort Dix. Or if they weren't wild dogs, then they were feral dogs, domestic dogs, one generation removed or whatever. And I don't remember anything at Fort Benning, but and that's in Georgia. But when I got to Florida, I was stationed in Tallahassee, and right below Tallahassee is a densely forested area that's owned by Scott Paper, Scott Paper Company.
Sure.
And then, of course, the Apalachicola National Forest just dominates that whole region, the Panhandle, and to the southwest of Tallahassee in that area. And then, of course, to the north, it's just all forests and everything. And that, to the west of Tallahassee off of I-10 and the other small routes that run out onto the Panhandle, that's a big area for Bigfoot that a lot of people don't haven't come to learn to appreciate yet. But if you remember, the first episode of Finding Bigfoot was in Florida, and then they went back to that same place, and it's that area that I'm talking about, which is just to the west of Tallahassee, and there's a little town called Midway, and then another town called Quincy, and then it goes on out. There's working its way further out on the. If you saw the area, it's pine trees and palm trees, and it's just a real mix of forests and grasslands together. And of course, then there's a lot of swampy areas too. So it's not unusual to run into some of those mangrove swamps along the coast as well. And that was an area where a group of guys and I were interested in researching Bigfoot. And that area, it was very promising, and it brought us a lot of encounters. Stacy Brown and Stacy Brown Jr. Okay, and that they did, what was it, the first? They had that video in the dark.
Yeah. I did an enhancement of that video for them. Actually, still on our YouTube channel somewhere.
Yeah, that's Torreya State Park, and Torreya State Park is a really odd place. It's one of the places that was speculatively designated as possibly being paradise on earth because of everything that grows there is mentioned in the Bible. And there are 7 other places in the world that are like that researchers back in the turn of the century, 100 years ago, were all fired up and interested in seeing if they couldn't find where Eden had been, where it really had been. And Torreya Park it just has all of these odd trees and everything. And the Torreya tree is one of those trees, apparently. So it's a series of, it sits on one of the large rivers, and there's steep embankments that run up. This is Apalachicola, I think. You know, they're all Appalachia this and Appalachia that down there, but I think this is probably the Apalachicola River. And some of the embankments run up 100 feet before you get up to where, you know, the dense vegetation and everything is, and the river's down below. But that's that particular area where Torreya State Park is. I want to say Liberty County, but I'm not sure if it's Liberty or if it's the next county over. But okay, Liberty County, and a thick area. When you go out there, when you drive out there at night on the 2-lane highway that cuts through that part of the Panhandle, you know, if you shut your lights off, you can't see anything.
Yeah, I've been down in through there. My dad actually lived in Orlando. My uncle lived down there too for years later, and then we vacationed there when I was younger, years ago.
Yeah, and if it starts raining heavy at night, your best bet is just to pull off the side of the road, because your headlights aren't going to shine through the downpouring. And I mean, it's just one of those areas, and of course, it's just, again, all the noisemakers at night in out there again, and so there's no peace at night. But during the daytime, not far from where Stacy Brown took his video, I was walking one of those back trails in Torreya State Park, and had a similar looking sighting to what he had on his video. And it was an odder shaped than, I mean, it really hunkered head down, sunk in its shoulders, and arms that seemed very, very long, and not an enormously broad shouldered animal, but maybe like half of what you normally think of when you think of like a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And then very, very long legs from the knees down to the feet. Very, very long legs. And I was with another person, and I kept pointing to it, and I kept saying, look at that. The person I was with looked at everything else but. And so I had there was no collaboration that day whatsoever. And I was like, I'm not taking you out here again, because I'm ashamed that you couldn't see that thing, That's an interesting place. If you can get down to Torreya in that area in and around Midway and in and around Quincy, it's got to net you some experience and some encounters.
Roughly what year did that happen?
Long before the Browns were down there. At that time, I lived in Tallahassee for 5 years, and I'm thinking that was like 90. 1991 or 1992, the summer of 90. It would have been the summer of 92. I had to think through that. I literally had to think through that. I had to think which girlfriend I had at the time. Sorry.
I do that too.
So it's like, okay, that's who it was. And also in the Apalachicola National Forest, we had a lot of experiences, and of course you never hear anything because it's just so loud with all the insects.
Yeah.
Even right up until the morning when, as the sun's coming up, the insects are still making, a nauseating amount of noise. And then all of a sudden the sun comes up and everything gets quiet for a while. And the air stirs. But there are a lot of sinkholes down in that area. We used to park ourselves in and around several of the interesting sinkholes. Big Dismal was one that we used to use, and we would take a German Shepherd with us that one of the fellows owned, and just because it got so loud we couldn't hear anything, we figured the dog would smell something. And he would sit with us. He would not go off on his own. He would just sit with us. He was a good fella. But his ears perked up, or he looked around, and we figured, okay, he smelled something. But I mean, it could be anything too, from bobcat to fox or whatever. But that's an interesting area. And just down the road from that, there was an area that we used to go down, and we would bring the soldiers down, and we would train land navigation, night land navigation, and day navigation. And it was a power line that cut through that area heading south, and so it had wide access, had dual roads going down on either side of it, and it was easy to get in. It was never locked, and we used to get in there, and we used to do night land navigation. And oddly enough, the some Florida State University used to go down in there, and they would train the guys that were in charge of that. The cadet programs would train them. The ROTC programs would train down in there at night and stuff. And so sometimes we would lend some of our expertise to helping those guys out. And a lot of times we would, if they needed aggressors or anything else like that, we would send half a dozen guys down to pretend to be the aggressors, to follow them through the woods, whatever, make the false attack on them and everything. Attack their patrols, that type of thing, so that they had the opportunity to learn how to defend themselves in that kind of environment and everything. And we were down in there on one particular night, and we could hear branches breaking out in front of us, and we knew that we were close to the cadets. And we were certain of it. And so I gave the guys the command to fan out onto my right side, and they moved out, and everybody was 15 meters apart. And so now we're parallel to one another, moving in the same direction, and hoping to catch them parallel to them, so that we could attack them. And I ended up taking a knee and going down, and the radio man was with me, and the guy that was closest to us, 15 feet away, took a knee as well, because we spotted something standing out in front of us, and I was waiting for clouds to dissipate so the moon would shine again. And this went on like 2 or 3 times. I would get up and it would leave, because whatever I thought I saw was gone. And so I So about the third time I took a knee. Now we probably haven't moved 15 or 20 meters, and I've taken a knee 3 times. And we're something that to me only had to be like a Bigfoot or a skunk ape because of its size. The going on with the cadets, but somebody fired one of their weapons. Of course, they had blank rounds and everything. Fired one of the weapons, and that kind of spoiled the whole event. Next thing I know, the guys that are further down on my line, they start firing and everything, and whatever it was that we were watching was gone in a flash.
Oh yeah.
So 3 of us had seen something, but we could not tell what it was, and we knew it wasn't a person. Very, very close to that spot, on another occasion, and we're doing the same kind of thing. We're moving down a trail. It could only really be described as it was probably a game trail, and the bicyclists went in there with their mountain bikes and kind of improved on it by riding up and down it. And we were moving down that, and it was the same kind of a situation where there was a partial moon, and there were some clouds, but they would clear and then they would come back, and they'd clear and come back. And the point man that's out in front of me at this time goes down on one knee, so I go down on a knee. I'm probably 30 feet away from him, and the radio man goes down as well, and the other guys behind us go down. And the point man's sitting there for the longest time, and he's turns and he looks at us, and he's making arm and hand signals, but it was like it made no sense. Even though I've got night vision goggles on, it made no sense what he was trying to explain to me. And I almost wanted to just say, I give up. Come back here, will you? In a voice loud enough so he would. Well, all of a sudden he just pops up and he runs towards us. And I mean, he's hauling butt. And then he runs right by us and he keeps going. He never even said a word to us. And he goes right by us, and I'm looking at the radio man, and the radio man's looking at me, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. We couldn't figure it out. So finally, after about 10 minutes, I sat there and waited because I was like, something spooked him. And we waited probably a good 10 minutes, and I'm not kidding. And finally I said, so let's back off. Let's go find him and see what's up. And he's out under the power lines, and he's still acting like he's shaky and everything. And I said, what do you see? And he says, there's a Christmas tree down there. He said, he kept going like this. And that's what he was trying to tell me, was there was a pine tree down there. And he says, there's a Christmas tree down there. He says, it walked away. I said, what? He goes, there was a Christmas tree down there. And he said, it walked away. I said, really? And he said, yes. He says, it got up and walked away. And I was like, we got to go see this. So we walked all the way back in. It probably took us about 8 or 10 minutes just walking in now. And we walked in. We had flashlights and everything went down. We got down there, and we're standing there, and we could hear crackling and everything. And he says, right there, he says, right next to that other Christmas tree, he says, there was another Christmas tree. and I said, so there were 2 Christmas trees? And he said, yeah, one of them walked away. And I was like, okay. And as we're standing there, that Christmas tree starts to shake. You want to see a bunch of guys freak out and run? The only thing I could think of is whatever he saw was still behind the tree. But it was the funniest thing. It was like, one guy panics and everybody, it just goes through you, and everybody's gone. And we're clawing on each other, trying to get past each other, going down that little bicycle path. And it was probably the funniest thing because we're all halfway back, we're all in tears laughing. But there's been experiences like that, and I have no doubt that he saw something, and that whatever he saw, he figured it must have been as big as a Christmas tree. We did not go back a third time that night. I was like, okay, we're done. Once you lose your composure, in that kind of event, you know how it's like being out at night. Everything out there is like potential something else. And once you lose your composure, it's done. It's like, okay, I am not going. I don't care if these are big, hardened, combat trained soldiers, and some of them have bronze medals or whatever. We're not going back out in the woods now. We're going back up to the camp. So there's been events like that are just comical. But that's all been interesting experience. And go back down, and in that area we would find partial prints in the sand, but I don't think we ever found anything a full print in that particular area. I can't remember ever casting anything, because it was like, okay, it would only be like 3 of the toes and maybe the heel or something like that. But it didn't make it. We didn't make any castings in that whole crowd of guys.
And that event took place in the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah, that would be in the same time period. That would be like 1992, 1993, right up until like probably the spring of '94. We was still, that was a tight group, and then people started, one thing or another was going on one place or another, and some of those guys were volunteering for posts other places. Because there were combat situations, and some of these guys were just they were gung ho, and they just had to go see what combat was like. That particular unit that I was in was the unit that I went to the Gulf War with, and so they all had their ribbons and everything from the Gulf War and stuff, and so anybody that was new that came into it heard all the stories, and from the soldiers in that unit, and they all thought they had to go someplace to get a campaign ribbon or whatever, regardless of what. Okay, we tell the stories, but at the same time, it wasn't that fun. It's after all, it was a war, so
right.
Yeah.
So our buddy Evan wants to know if you've ever seen a juvenile that you know of.
Yeah. I don't believe so, but what I'm thinking about is, I don't think any of the guys that were with me had seen a juvenile either. That'd be interesting.
I've never seen a juvenile or small one, but I found my tracks of juveniles and little small ones about, 8 or 10 inches long.
Right.
I've seen several, but when I say several, I mean less than 6. But yeah. Several juveniles, and they've ranged from everything from very, very chimp-like to just hair-covered. Little boy that looked hair-covered. So
yeah.
They range from everything in between, and
right.
But so yeah, and what I was thinking about is the guy that saw the monkeys. It's possible maybe that he may have seen some adults and some juveniles or something. Maybe I don't.
Yeah, that's. I never thought of that, because Tom and I kept looking at each other, going, "There's no monkeys here." And and here we were guys that talked about Bigfoot all the time and everything, and yet we're going, "There's no monkeys here." So it's like we thought he was nuts, because if he had said, "Is there a Bigfoot here?" that would have right away. We would have, yeah. Well, is that what you're seeing? But where he kept saying monkeys, we were like, and I don't think I don't know. Are there any monkeys in Somalia? I'm not sure that there are, but
I don't know right off.
Yeah. So I don't know what he thought maybe he was seeing, but the closest thing that he could figure that they were monkeys. So.
Somebody asked a question there. Have you ever tried gifting with a Bigfoot, leaving food item or anything like that?
No, I have not. I have some places here in and around the property in New Hampshire where I've had some very interesting occurrences.
Is that some of the photos that you sent?
Yeah, some of those photos.
Okay, let's see if we've got any of those.
Yeah. I'm still trying to ascertain whether we've got 22 bears in the area, black bears.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still trying to ascertain what some of the damage to the saplings and things is caused by the black bears, and what is potentially caused by a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or some other kind of forest giant.
Well, what's this we're looking at here? Is this a damaged sapling?
Yeah, that's if I put my hand in the air over my head,
mm-hmm.
that's where that broke off.
Yeah, there's a complete shot of it.
Yeah. So that was way up, and I couldn't understand that. I'm perfectly fine one day, and the next day I go down in there, and it's broken. So you can see, I mean, it's bigger. It's as big around as my wrist.
Oh, that's a good size then, yeah.
Yeah. And
I have something else here too. I do believe I wanted to get it to go.
Now, when we were talking in the chat last night, and I asked if the top of that sapling was still there, the reason I asked is because it frequently happens, especially in one particular area for me, that things will be broken off and completely taken out of the area. They're not dropped on the ground. They're not laying beside the tree. They're completely gone from the area.
It was not there. Now, this one you're looking at, you can clearly see almost in the middle there's a game trail.
Yeah, there's definitely a trail there.
Now, if you go down to the bottom of the picture where the game trail starts, and then just, maybe a finger wide over on, you see that dark spot that's at the bottom of the picture? Yeah, the other way. I'm sorry, okay. My left, your left. There's a dark spot, and then another dark spot. Yeah. So there's one down at the very, very bottom of the picture. Then there's one there. And that's what I was looking at exactly. That's what I was looking at. These are probably a good 6 feet apart or more.
Yeah. You're talking about right here.
Right. And then
you got one right on the edge of the picture here.
Right. And then you can see where that game trail goes up, and then there's a place where you can make it out. There's a log that's fallen down, a tree. Go down further, Tom. Bring the bottom up a little bit. Yeah, right there. Now see that dark area? Mm-hmm. No, down below. You just touched it. Down below here. Down there. See that? Go across. Yeah, if you go across right where you see it. That's a log.
Oh, okay.
Tree. You see, and that's a tree. And you can clearly see where something stepped right on top of that, like a great big old galosha boot, and pressed it down, like somebody with like size 14 to size 15 galoshes.
Yeah, you can see the tree laying there now.
Yeah, and that really got my attention. And I talked to Nancy about this on and off for probably 2 weeks, and she looked at the photos and everything too. But of course, it's not clear in a photo. It's like, but I walked all through that area, and and I could see where the deer had bedded down, and I could see where something else had bedded down too. And it really got my interest.
I got a picture of that, I think, somewhere. It's,
That's that log, yeah.
that's the log. Yeah, you can actually see the step there. Looks like
Right, right. It was. That's a step. And there were two of them going in through there, and you can actually follow. That's that.
Yeah, we'll get to that just in a little bit.
That's my favorite one.
This year, I see the rock wall there.
Yeah, that rock wall, and then you can see where between that rock wall and on the right hand side, you can see where there's a dead tree, right?
Right.
And that dead tree has fallen down, and it's as long as that rock wall. And and there's a dip in that, and somebody can sit in that and be concealed by the fallen tree and the fallen in the rock wall. And that just got my interest because it looks like somebody had been doing that, where they had sat down, like they were using it as a deer blind. It was just, it's concealment. And I've got to go back out there and take a look at it and see where the rock wall is, and it goes off into the horizon there. That just drops right off to no place.
That's neat. Do you know anything about the rock wall? Do you know how the rock wall got there?
Well, I don't, and it doesn't make any sense to have it there.
I know where some are that's been hand stacked like that, but there was houses there probably 70 years ago. They were actually stacked a little neater than that, but.
Yeah, we have all sorts of farmland up here, and this was all dairy,
sure,
and sheep, and
probably just on the outside of a pasture at one time.
It is. There's a pasture, but there's a pasture right. If you're looking at the picture, there's a pasture just behind you.
Right here.
But it's and down in there's another pasture. I mean, there's pasture land here everywhere in New Hampshire. It's either pasture land or forest. Once in a while somebody sticks a house in there.
Yeah. Have you had a sighting in New Hampshire recently or anything?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't, but I know other people have. Now, we're in Grafton County, and Grafton County is pretty much the entire White Mountain National Forest. And I had contact with Crystal Panic. Now, Crystal Panic lives down in the southern part of New Hampshire, but she is finding Bigfoot, whatever they call themselves. What's BFRO? She is BFRO's New Hampshire investigator. She has her map of New Hampshire with all the counties, and she's got a couple counties here and a couple counties there where they've marked off there's been sightings. She has investigated and approved or accredited 87 sightings in Grafton County alone. And no other county has more than maybe 5 or 6. Now, wow. I know that there's some down in Hillsborough County and further south, because anything that runs along the Appalachian Trail has Bigfoot.
Well, now Jason Morris, who is one of our team members, he had sightings in Newmarket.
Yes.
So that's we're going to have him on the show in next week? Next week? Yeah.
Yep. That'll be interesting. So that'll be very interesting. But yeah, that's where New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts all come together, and you have the the end of the Green Mountains, the end of the White Mountains, and then you have the Berkshire Mountains all coming together in that area. There's a lot of Bigfoot activity in that area, and then of course
I know you want to talk about this picture.
Yeah. We see it all the time.
Oh,
every time I see that picture, I'm like, wait, let me show you the real picture, and then I pop up the other picture.
Look at that.
This picture was taken back around the original picture without the gorilla hanging in it. That's from Alaska, and that was a hunting lodge. That's actually a postcard that you can send back to your friends from Alaska when you go hunting up there. But that's taken around 1904. That's a big bear, and then somebody decided they doctored it up and turned it into a Bigfoot, I guess.
Yeah, Photoshop is it's a good tool, but no, it can't be used for stuff like that.
Yeah, that's always been my favorite, and I'm like, it's a good one too.
That guy there is living on forever right there, isn't he?
He is. He's world famous now.
See,
and there it is. It's the funniest thing.
And the thing is, anytime somebody's new in the Bigfoot world and they see this, they usually believe it and think it's legitimate. And so we have to go through the whole process of trying to educate them that no, this is a known fake and known hoax. And sometimes they don't take that kind of thing too well.
No.
Most times they don't take that kind of thing too well.
They don't want to be told the truth sometimes.
It's like the first time I saw Blinky. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
First time I saw Blinky, I was like, what is that? And I couldn't believe it. My mother was 93, 94 years old. I said, Mom, come on. I pulled a chair over next to me. We were at the table in the dining room, and I they had a little laptop computer there. And I said, what is that? And she goes, she was trying to say Hollywood because she was having difficulties at that time, but she was like, Hollywood? I said, yeah, that's what we'll call him. No, we'll call him Blinky.
Yeah, there's a lot of hoaxes out there, man. Well, there's a popular one going around now about a Bigfoot who uses a cell phone and drives a truck and all that stuff. And Leo and I have talked about this some. There's some pretty famous people that's in behind that and kind of support that, which we don't want to get into, great detail on it. But a lot of people believes it, and it's definitely not real.
I think I saw something like that too.
Yeah, they gave it a new name now. I don't remember what the original name of the Bigfoot was, but they gave it a new name now, and I guess they're repackaging it. And, but yeah, it's not legitimate. So
there are some good ones. There were some in that were taken up in Maine. 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Maybe 3 years ago. Anyway, the newspaper in Bangor, the newspaper in Bangor, got a hold of and somebody, and they were showing these pictures around, and I swear when you blow it up and you look at it, it literally is like a person who's in a bear outfit, but he hasn't put the head on.
Oh boy. And
I was like, you got to be kidding me. You can clearly see he's not wearing the head.
You got to laugh at it, though, because sometimes it's very frustrating. I know all three of us, we take the subject seriously, and we want to, be truthful and everything. But, man, sometimes it's really frustrating because those fakes and phonies seem like they gain a lot of traction. Yeah, and then you put out something that's real, a real story, real foot track, and people just look over it. They don't care.
They want the instant. They want to be spoon-fed for one thing.
They
Yeah.
do.
They expect everybody to hand them their proof. They don't understand that anything on any picture or video or anything is not going to be proof. That it doesn't matter how clear it is,
Right.
unless nothing is going to be universally accepted.
Accepted. Yeah, I agree.
But
I,
there was some team. I think they accidentally recorded themselves hoaxing here a couple weeks ago. I didn't click on the link, but apparently this research team, somebody yelled action before they were supposed to, because they filmed themselves doing this hoax and uploaded it to YouTube before they realized, we had the camera on before we were supposed to. But
Wow.
yeah, I didn't click on it because when it comes to hoaxes and especially Blinky's friend there,
Right.
Glass eyes.
Yeah,
Glass.
the worst thing that you can do is give a hoaxer attention. So ordinarily, I don't even bother clicking on it. But when I saw that somebody their team actually accidentally filmed themselves hoaxing, man, this is getting bad.
Well, but I like YouTube and all that kind of stuff, but there's some channels that's making I would assume a pretty good income stream from posting nothing but hoax videos. I mean, they have 63,000 subscribers, and they'll have 500 videos, and 499 of them are known hoaxes, and the last one's questionable. But they're making a pretty good income off of some of that. I guess that's why they do it.
That's wild.
Well, it's because regardless of how many times you tell somebody that no, this person isn't just someone that people decided to get mad at, and this person is actually not a very good person, and they hoax. That's sorry, but they do. If they've got something reasonably clear, the people will say, "Well, you can't prove that. You can't prove that it's a hoax."
They do that with tree breaks and stick structures. Well, you didn't see what made it. No, but this big 16-inch track beside it sort of gives me an idea.
Yeah, I do. It's funny because I've got friends who believe that they believe in me, and then I've got friends that are just like, no effing way. Excuse me for saying that, but that's the way they are. And I'm going, well, I wouldn't share this information with you if I didn't think that what I was telling you was, possible, and or what I had actually seen was what I was trying to convey to you was truthful as best of my ability, what it was, But I've got one friend that's like, he's always teasing me about it. And I was like, one of these days, you're going to tell me something and I'm not going to believe you.
Well, some of my family thought I was actually going crazy.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Yeah. My family was kind of like that too. They thought I was kind of crazy.
And then
I don't get any guff. I get zero guff from my family. I only have a very small circle of family that I keep close to, but they pretty well know that if I say something, especially about that, they know that I either am telling the absolute truth or I believe what I'm saying.
Right.
But they give me my family. I can honestly say that my family gives me zero guff.
We've been doing our show here. Show's almost over. About 2 hours, and I just now noticed that Leo does not have his bandana on. He always wears the bandana.
Oh man, it was too warm today.
Yeah,
it was way too warm.
Oh, I thought you was a Brett Michaels fan.
Oh well, think again there, pal.
Hey, back in the day, it was all right. I like him pretty well.
I know, but back in the day, I was too cool to like anything quite that was a little bit light for me at the time.
No glam rock.
No glam. Well,
he still wears his bandana all the time.
Certain things from Appetite for Destruction, like Welcome to the Jungle, they still had their hair all teased up and everything like that.
I know.
So That's about as glam as I went.
The hair bears.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's about time to end the show. My nose itching. My back's kind of hurting me, so I'm squiggling around a whole lot too. Stephen, tell people where they can find you at and
I will.
how to contact you before we go.
I will. I appreciate you guys spending the time and the effort doing what you do. You know that. And, I'm one of your big fans, both of you. And
Appreciate that.
I really appreciate you taking the time and letting me come on the show. And if I get any sightings up here, I'll certainly let you know about it, so we can talk about it again.
Oh, it's been great, man. Your stories have been great. I've loved them.
Well, it's what I have, and so if you got a good story to tell, you got to tell it, and you got to tell it. You can't keep it penned up inside. You got it out. You got to get it out.
I knew you had a lot of experience over, in Germany and in different states, but I didn't know it was to this extent.
We didn't even get into all of them. There were some more. We didn't get into all of them.
Oh yeah, there's some more too, but another time.
We sure do appreciate you coming on.
I don't see any reason not to have you back. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Have you got a website or Facebook or anything where people can find you?
I have on Facebook, and it's just under my name, so it's Stephen M. Kohler. So I'm Stephen M. Kohler, and every once in a while I post on something on my page, but most of the time I go to Leo's page and I post there. So it'll be found on the Sasquatch people and other forest giants, because that's, to me, that was the vehicle that was out there at the time, and I was accepted there right off the bat. So that's where I always go.
Okay, sounds good.
Leo and Nancy were good to me. So
yeah, they were me too.
I'm sure I stirred up some people in the beginning, because I was there were some controversial things, and I was like, wait a minute.
It's hard to be quiet when you know.
That's right.
But in the end, sometimes it's best just to let it go by. It takes a while to learn that, so I'm still trying. But I'll go ahead and kick you over to the green room, and me and Leo will close out the show. And we appreciate you coming on, and I hope you've had a good time. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the stories.
All right, gentlemen. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Let me find all right, Leo. So I really enjoyed his stories. He had some good ones, and like I say,
he's an interesting dude, man. He is.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, on social media, he does comment and make a few posts, but to actually have him on video and talk to him and hear the stories, he don't really share it. I've not seen where he shared those stories online publicly.
He has posted a few things, but he's not a look at me kind of guy.
Well, that's the best kind. Usually they got the best stories, and they've had the real experiences. The people who are screaming, "Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" That's the guys that are usually wanting the attention. They're doing it just for the views or clicks, and we all like views and clicks, but we want to do it honestly and maintain a reputation. To me, I think that's the way it is important to me. The reputation is. You can't be in the business of what I do and what I try to live my life and have a shady reputation. It just don't work. And I know you feel the same way.
I don't think you have to worry about it too much.
I do, though. That's the thing. I used to, when we would bring new people into our research group, that was the one thing I always stressed, was that you are a reflection of me. So if you're out doing bad stuff, it comes back to me, and it weighs on my reputation. And man's word is reputation. Sometimes that's really all you have when it comes down to the end. So I tried to stress that to new members who, when we, we're bringing new members into our research group.
Well, I think that message is, if it doesn't come across in your work, then they're not going to get it from words.
Man, you're probably right. I try to be honest, man. That's a fault, I guess.
Oh, I don't think it's a fault. It almost seems like it is these days.
Yeah, sometimes it's. What I can say, I'm trying to get to where I can just pass by things, but sometimes it's people who are friends of mine, and I don't want them to get off in the wrong direction or believe something that I know that is fake. And so, really, I'm trying to be helpful to them, and sometimes they don't see that.
No, they just get plain hateful when they don't want to entertain the other side of it. And
nope.
So it's just instant anger, and then a big argument sometimes it's just not worth it.
I agree with you. Before we go, guys, I want to thank Leo, of course, and thank Rebecca. He calls Rebecca. I call her Rebecca. I don't know why, but she takes care of the chat for us, and I really appreciate her helping us out and taking care of that. And we need to tell you that our next show coming up, we're going to have Jason Morris, who is from New Hampshire, from Newmarket, New Hampshire, where he had his sightings. We actually did a small documentary on Jason's story. Got some pretty interesting things in it. You can find it on Tubi now, and you can also find it on Amazon, but you can watch it on Tubi for free. It's Bigfoot Witness, the Jason Morris story. And no bad luck, he will be on our show next week. And I think that'll be a good show because Jason's had quite a bit of field experience, and he's had several sightings, Bigfoot sightings. So I think that'll be a fun show.
Oh, I'm going to have a blast with Jason on here.
Yeah. He sings. He's a singer, so maybe we can talk him into singing something for us for fun. He'd probably do it. So, and he also, when he's on the show, we need to talk about his book. He wrote a excellent Western book called The Road to Leadville, which we want to talk about that when he's on the show.
Yes, he did. I have it right over on my shelf.
It's really a good book, and if you've not read it, I would recommend it. And there's actually some kind of sneaky references to Bigfoot in the book, which if you're paying attention, you'll catch if you're into Bigfoot. But that will be our show for today, and me and Leo will sign off. And Leo, I think, is gonna go to bed, and probably me too.
Oh yeah, I'm halfway there now.
Let me see if I can get us off of here. All right, Leo. Say bye, Leo.
Bye, Leo.
And wash your bandana and have it back on next week, buddy.
All right. That big head of mine scares you.
No, I it's the thing with 2-hour show, and I just realized you wasn't wearing your bandana. All right, be good, Leo.
All right, have a good night.
You too. Whoops. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. All right, guys. I'm going to sign off, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.